Hey guys, welcome back to another video from the Decision Desk HQ YouTube channel. My name is Ryan Gest, Elections Data Fellow here at DDHQ, and continuing in our analysis of the 2024 general election, let's take a look at each party's best path to taking, or for Democrats, maintaining control of the United States Senate. If you haven't already seen our videos on Joe Biden and Donald Trump's easiest paths to 270 electoral votes, go ahead and check those out by clicking the link in the upper right-hand corner. In today's video, we will be discussing the Democratic Party's best and easiest path to controlling a minimum of 50 seats following next year's Senate elections. On your screen now is a blank 2024 Senate map. 33 of the 100 seats in the U.S. Senate will be contested in regular elections, the winners of which will serve 6-year terms in the U.S. Congress from January 3, 2025 to January 3, 2031, and one special election will be held to complete an unexpired term ending January 3, 2027. Generally, senators are divided into 3 classes whose terms are staggered so that a different class is elected every 2 years. Class 1 senators who were last elected in 2018 will be up for election again here in 2024. Now, as of June 2023, 1 Republican senator, Mike Braun of Indiana, and 4 Democratic senators, Ben Cardin of Maryland, Tom Carper of Delaware, Dianne Feinstein of California, and Debbie Stabenow of Michigan, have all announced their intention to retire and not run for re-election in 2024. Another Republican, Ben Sasse of Nebraska, resigned early to accept a position as president of the University of Florida. Nebraska Governor Jim Pillen appointed Pete Ricketts as the state's interim senator, and a special election will take place concurrently with the 2024 regular Senate elections to fill that seat for the remainder of the term. The map for these elections, like in the previous Class 1 Senate election in 2018, is universally considered by election analysts to be unfavorable for the Democratic Party, who will be defending 23 of the 33 seats. 3 Democrats in this class represent states won by Donald Trump both in 2016 and 2020: Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia. Meanwhile, no Republicans represent states won by Joe Biden in 2020, and in the previous 2 Senate election cycles that coincided with presidential elections, 2016 and 2020, only 1 senator, Republican Susan Collins of Maine in 2020, was elected in a state that was won by the presidential nominee of the opposite party. Further, Democrats are defending seats in 6 states that Biden won by a single-digit margin: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, Minnesota, and Maine, while Republicans are defending only 2 seats in states that Trump won by a single-digit margin: Florida and Texas. Finally, Kyrsten Sinema's first term is ending in Arizona, a state that Biden won by less than 0.5% in 2020. Sinema left the Democratic Party and became an independent in December of 2022, and it is currently unclear whether Sinema will run for re-election, and whether any national Democrats will even support her re-election campaign, given that Congressman Ruben Gallegos has already launched his campaign for the Democratic nomination. So, now to begin, we can go ahead and label the states and races that have a high degree of partisan lean in either direction, and where there are currently no special circumstances as of right now that might make these races uniquely competitive in this cycle. Keep in mind that these Senate elections will be held concurrently with the presidential election, and split-ticket voting, where voters vote for candidates of different parties for different offices, has become more and more rare over the last decade. So how states lean at the presidential level will mostly mirror races at the Senate level as well. In the state of Washington, four-term Democrat Maria Cantwell was reelected in 2018 with 58% of the vote, and has publicly expressed interest in running for re-election. The state of Washington has not elected a Republican to the Senate since 1994, and it voted for Joe Biden by 19 points in 2020. In California, five-term Democrat Dianne Feinstein is retiring, with several notable Democratic U.S. representatives, Barbara Lee, Katie Porter, and Adam Schiff, running to succeed her. California last elected a Republican senator in 1988. As for the Aloha State, Hawaii, two-term Democrat Mazie Hirono was reelected in 2018 with 71% of the vote, the largest share for a candidate in either party in that cycle. Hirono is indeed running for re-election. Each of these West Coast states are solidly Democratic states in presidential elections, as are each of the following northeastern states. Starting in New York, two-term Democrat Kirsten Gillibrand was reelected in 2018 with 67% of the vote, and she is running for a third term. Former representative of New York's 1st Congressional District and Republican nominee for governor of New York in 2022, Lee Zeldin, has not ruled out seeking the Republican nomination to challenge Gillibrand. He did come within 7 points of Governor Kathy Hochul in 2022, but Hochul was running as an unelected incumbent. And if Zeldin does indeed take on Gillibrand in 2024, he will be facing a much more popular two-term incumbent, with the Democratic president on the ballot just 4 years after Biden won New York by 23 points. As for the state of Vermont, three-term independent Bernie Sanders, who caucuses with the Democratic Party, has yet to announce whether he will run for re-election. But Vermont is the most Democratic state in the entire country, according to Cook PVI. And just to the south, the second most Democratic state is Massachusetts, where two-term Democrat Elizabeth Warren was reelected in 2018 with 60.3% of the vote. Warren announced that she is indeed running for re-election. Three-term incumbents Sheldon Whitehouse and Chris Murphy are running for re-election in Rhode Island and Connecticut, respectively, and both won in 2018 by greater than 20-point margins. As for the state of New Jersey, three-term Democrat Bob Menendez is running for a fourth term. He was indicted back in 2015 on federal corruption charges, but the charges were dropped and he managed to win re-election in 2018 by 11 points. He may face some minor primary challenges, but New Jersey is rated as safely Democratic by Cook, Sabato's Crystal Ball, and Inside Elections. Moving on, as previously mentioned, Democratic incumbents are retiring in Delaware and Maryland. But neither state has elected a Republican senator since the 90s, and that is unlikely to change here in 2024 as Biden won both states by over 19 points in 2020. As for the safe Republican states, starting in Utah, one-term Senator Mitt Romney is running for re-election, but is likely to face serious Republican primary competition after he voted to impeach former President Donald Trump twice. Romney has been endorsed by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, but whichever candidate emerges as the senator's chief competition will likely receive considerable public backing from Trump himself. Whether it is Romney or somebody else, though, Utah is a safe Republican state come November 2024. In Wyoming and Nebraska, two-term GOP senators John Barrasso and Deb Fischer, respectively, were reelected in 2018 by significant margins and are both running for a third term. In Nebraska, Pete Ricketts will be running as an unelected incumbent in a special election after being appointed to replace Ben Sasse. And while he may face some competition in the primary, the general election will be safely Republican as Nebraska voted for Trump by 19 points in 2020 and has not elected a Democratic senator since 2006. As for the states of North Dakota and Missouri, both feature one-term incumbents, Kevin Cramer and Josh Hawley, respectively, who unseated Democratic senators in 2018. Cramer defeated Heidi Heitkamp by an 11-point margin, and Hawley defeated Claire McCaskill by 6 points. Both senators will likely win by wider margins now running as incumbents, and in a presidential year, as North Dakota and Missouri are assuredly Republican states. In Mississippi and Tennessee, two-term Senator Roger Wicker and one-term Senator Marsha Blackburn are running for re-election. Neither state has elected a Democrat to the Senate since the 80s. Finally, the state of Indiana, one-term Republican Senator Mike Braun is running for governor instead, and Congressman Jim Banks has already received the endorsement of former President Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Banks has no notable competition in the primary right now, but even if he did, those endorsements mean he is very likely to proceed to the general election, where he will be heavily favored over his Democratic opponent. Trump won Indiana by 16 points in 2020, and Braun flipped this seat blue to red by 6 points in 2018, which was the Democratic wave year. That leaves these 14 states as 2024's battlegrounds, though many of them will likely be much less competitive than others. Currently, Republicans have a 47 to 39 seat advantage, and are already just 3 seats shy of potentially taking control of the Senate if they also win the White House. That being said, for the purposes of this video, where we're trying to determine Democrats' most doable path to retaining control of the Senate, Joe Biden winning the 2024 presidential election is a critical step. If he wins, Dems would need to win 11 of the 14 states remaining. Still a tall task, but Biden does have a higher likelihood of winning than several of the fringe races Democrats will need to reach 50 seats. So, to get to 50, we can start with the most likely blue races. In New Mexico, two-term Democrat Martin Heinrich was reelected in 2018 with 54% of the vote in a 3-candidate race. Heinrich is running for a third term just 4 years after Biden won the state by 11 points in 2020. Another state that Biden won by double digits with an incumbent running for re-election is Virginia. Two-term Democrat Tim Kaine, Hillary Clinton's running mate in 2016, was re-elected in 2018 with 57% of the vote. There has been a lot of talk about Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin entering either the 2024 presidential or Senate race, as he will be term limited in 2025. This race would probably become more competitive if Youngkin does decide to take on Kaine. But for now, it can be placed in the likely blue section, as outside of Youngkin's surprise victory in 2021, Virginia has not voted Republican in a major statewide election since 2009, and it trended 5 points more Democratic at the presidential level between 2016 and 2020. In Minnesota, 3-term Democrat and 2020 presidential candidate Amy Klobuchar was reelected in 2018 with 60.3% of the vote. She is running for a 4th term and has won each of her previous Senate contests by over 20 percentage points. Minnesota is not a safe blue state necessarily, as it is a relatively competitive state in presidential elections, having voted for Hillary Clinton by just 1.5 points in 2016, and then Biden by 7 points in 2020, but Democrats can feel pretty comfortable about holding this seat with a popular incumbent like Klobuchar on the ballot. Finally, Maine is a uniquely intriguing race, as two-term independent incumbent Angus King, who caucuses with Democrats, intends to run for a 3rd term despite previously hinting that he may retire. King was reelected in 2018 with 54.3% of the vote in a 3-candidate election, defeating a Republican and a Democrat. The former Deputy Secretary of the Maine Department of the Environment, David Costello, entered the race as a Democrat, but King consistently ranks among the most popular senators in the country, and has defeated a Democrat and Republican in each of his previous contests. Those 4 races get Democrats to 43, and this is where the path starts getting more ambiguous and difficult. Biden either won each of the 10 states remaining by less than 3 points or lost, and Democrats have incumbents running in just about half of them. If we start by adding the races Biden won in 2020, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, that does get them to 48, still too shy of 50. Incumbent Senator Jackie Rosen is running for a second term in Nevada. She was first elected with 50.4% in 2018. Given Democrats' recent success statewide, Republicans don't have a very deep bench in the Silver State, with former state assemblyman Jim Marchant the most notable candidate in the field thus far. Marchant lost the general election for Secretary of State in 2022 and came short as the nominee for Nevada's 4th congressional district in 2020. As for the state of Arizona, whether or not independent Senator Kyrsten Sinema decides to run will have massive ramifications on the dynamics of this race, as a three-way battle pitting Sinema against a Democratic and Republican nominee will probably hurt Democrats' chances, given Sinema caucuses with Democrats and could split the Democratic-leaning vote. The Democratic Party does have established incumbents running in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Two-term Democrat Tammy Baldwin was re-elected in 2018 with 55.4% of the vote in Wisconsin, which voted for Biden by less than a full percentage point in 2020. Democrats have recently found some success and overperformed in statewide races in Wisconsin, including in 2022, where incumbent Governor Tony Evers won by a larger margin than most had expected. As for Pennsylvania, three-term Democrat Bob Casey Jr. was reelected in 2018 by a 13-point margin, an impressive feat given the competitiveness of the Keystone State, and Democrats have to feel good about their chances with Casey, no matter who Republicans nominate. Finally, four-term incumbent Debbie Stabenow is retiring and will not run for re-election in Michigan. Biden won Michigan by 2.8% in 2020, his largest margin in any of these 5 states, but without Stabenow, this race is expected to be very competitive this cycle. The most notable Democrats to enter the race to succeed Stabenow thus far are U.S. Representative Alyssa Slotkin, who leads the endorsement race by a wide margin, State Board of Education President Pamela Pugh, State Representative Leslie Love, and businessman Nasser Beydoun. The Republican field, on the other hand, is less clear as of right now, with several big-name candidates publicly expressing their interest in running. Okay, out of the 5 states that remain, the last 2 likely states that could give Democrats 50 seats are actually pretty clear. The GOP has incumbents running in Texas and Florida. Trump won both states in 2020 and will be favored again in 2024. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin has yet to decide whether he will run for a 3rd term in West Virginia, but Republicans' best news of the cycle thus far came when Governor Jim Justice entered the race. A former Democrat himself, Justice has the endorsement of Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham. That said, Congressman Alex Mooney is also in the race and has received the backing of Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, and Jim Jordan. Justice does have a significant early lead in Republican primary polling, and should he win the nomination, will have a very good chance in the general election, given West Virginia voted for Trump by 40 points in 2020, and is consistently one of the most Republican-leaning states in the entire country. That leaves Montana and Ohio as Democrats' last shots at 50 seats. Montana is a strongly red state at the presidential level, voting for Republican candidates since 1996, and most recently for Trump by 15 points in 2020. However, 3-term Democrat Jon Tester was narrowly reelected in Montana in 2018 with 50.3% of the vote, and is one of few remaining senators to represent states that voted for the opposing party in the last presidential election. A political anomaly in that regard, the broadly popular Tester is running for re-election, in Democrats' best news of the cycle thus far. Likewise, Ohio has trended towards Republicans in recent years, and is now seen as a moderately red state at the federal level after voting for Trump by 8-point margins both in 2016 and 2020. Republicans control the other U.S. Senate seat, all statewide offices, and a clear majority in its U.S. representative congressional delegation. However, once again, 3-term Democrat Sherrod Brown is running for a 4th term in Ohio, after he was reelected in 2018 with 53.4% of the vote. Brown, like Tester, is generally popular within the electorate of his state, but faces the challenge of navigating a less than favorable environment, especially given that it's a presidential election year in which his Republican opponent will likely benefit even more from the state's partisan leanings. Still, Montana and Ohio join the rest of these states, along with a Biden victory at the top of the ticket, as Democrats' best bet at reaching 50 Senate seats and maintaining control of the upper chamber. That is all for this Decision Desk HQ video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click that like button down below if you did indeed like the video, and subscribe to the channel down below as well if you haven't already. Also check out more content from our channel here, and we'll catch you next time.